Welcome back, everyone, to Law School Life and Beyond's Leadership Series. My name is Katya, and I am the host of this podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by Hena Singh. Hena is an employment lawyer and investigator in Toronto at her law firm, Singh Lamarche LLP. I'm really excited to have Hena on the show today because we haven't had anyone speak to employment or labor law as of yet, and so I'm really excited to pick her brain about this field of law. So with that...
Thank you so much, Hena, for agreeing to come on the show today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, my first question is always the origin story. What drew you to a career in law?
You know, I have a bit of a weird or funny backstory to this. I actually started down the path of becoming a psychologist. And I was finishing up my master's degree. And I was in the process of applying to do my PhD when my sister, who's now a lawyer, but at the time was a third-year law student, she actually sat me down and tried to convince me, and she was successful, that I would be better suited for law.
Cool.
And as I do in many situations involving my sister, I trusted her blindly. But the reality is I didn't know what lawyers did or what practicing law really was. I knew that lawyers argued a lot, and I was right, but I didn't know much else. And I'm really glad I listened to her.
Nice. And how was your law school experience?
I had a really great law school experience. I'm from Windsor, and I went to Windsor Law, and I felt like I had kind of the home game advantage the whole time I was in law school, because I had my family, I had my friends, I had everyone there. And so I had my home, and so it was really great. I'd made some really great friends. You don't realize, and they say this in law school, but you don't realize that the people that you meet in law school, these end up being some of your closest friends in your career thereafter. And they're the ones that refer work to you. They're the ones that you're going to basketball games with. You're the ones you're having drinks with after work, or, whatever, walking your dogs together. You don't realize it at the time that the connections that you're making or breaking in certain circumstances last a career. And I was really lucky to have made some friends that I still keep in very, very, very close contact with. And I really enjoyed my law school experience.
That's awesome. And I've thought about that too, coming into law school. It's not like undergrad or high school, because these people kind of just disappear. But law school, these are your future colleagues. You will see these people in work at some point or another. So that it's really cool, and it's important to pay mind to, and not to view law school as a huge networking experience, but it kind of is. You need to make sure that you're tolerable, because you are going to be working with these people at some point. So that's a really cool aspect of law school, I think.
I did a moot against a couple of people, and we had an agreed statement of facts. Or no, I did a trial. Or anyways, it was something that involved some sort of practice litigation, and we'd had an agreed statement of facts, and we had agreed upon a number of other things prior to engaging in this moot. And one of the people that I was against totally broke our agreement during this thing, and I was so upset. And I remember that's my third year of law school, and it's now 15 years later, and I still would not refer a file to this person, because I was like, integrity is all we have. And you as a lawyer, we fight, and we fight hard, and we argue, and we are positional, but we need to maintain that integrity. And I think as law students, we can kind of lose sight of how much impact our behavior is in law school, how that can impact the rest of our career.
No, that's so true. And they completely backdoored you.
Yeah, totally.
So then when you were in law school, did you have any idea what type of law you wanted to go into, or was that something you figured out after the fact?
I thought many things during law school, but not once before I summered at a Bay Street firm. Not once did I think employment law, or labor law for that matter. And so it was mostly criminal or litigation that I was interested in. And I got hired as a summer student, and then did my articling at a sister Bay Street firm. And I wanted to do 2 litigation rotations, and they said, no, you got to do something else. And I was like, what's the closest thing to litigation?
Yeah.
And they said employment. So I ended up doing an employment rotation first, and I just did employment for all of my articles. I did it for all of my summer.
Wow.
It was just a really good connection with the group and the area of law. So I kind of went in a bit blind into employment law, and it just worked out really, really well. And then in my 3rd year, I took all the courses and really kind of buckled down on committing to employment law. But through law school, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
That is really cool, though, that it clicked that summer and you were able to commit that 3rd year to employment law, and it's just been a perfect match since. Like, what a nice feeling.
Yeah, it was a good fit, and I was glad that I found it so early. Sometimes people are like in the middle of their career, 5 years out, and they're like, "Ugh, I hate litigation," or "I hate personal injury," or "I hate real estate," and then all of a sudden they're starting again. And so I was lucky to have found it so early on.
And do you mind just describing what employment law is, please?
Yeah, it's basically all facets of the law relating to non-unionized workplaces.
Okay.
So for unionized workplaces, it's called labor law, but
okay.
yeah, and most
Important
people confuse
distinction.
them.
Yeah, that's an important
Yes.
distinction.
But I'm called a labor lawyer all the time, and I only practice in employment law. I did labor at the Bay Street firm, but I haven't done it since. But people, often confuse the term. But labor is the unionized context, and employment is the non-unionized workplaces.
Okay.
And so what we do at my firm, Singh Lamarche, is we help with all elements of the employment relationship. So we help employers and employees with everything from hiring to firing and everything in between.
Wow.
And so most of our cases, as a firm, are dealing with wrongful dismissal. So people get terminated, and then they're negotiating severance packages. But myself, the majority of the work that I do is workplace investigations. So this is where there's some sort of like conflict in the workplace that involves one or more humans, and the employer or their counsel reaches out to me to come in and figure out what happened. So I'm a fact finder, and I make determinations as to someone's behavior, whether it's in law, whether it's harassment, discrimination, violence, fraud, theft, you name it. And so I'll say, here's what happened, and it is or is not harassment, it is or is not fraud, it is or is not sexual harassment, or whatever it is I'm dealing with at the time. Wow. And that's cool. It's a very, very neat area of law.
Yeah. How did you even get involved in that?
So I left the sister firm that I was at, the Bay Street firm, to go to a boutique employment law firm.
Okay.
And they did a lot of investigations there. So I had my first experience with investigations there. And there was a huge change in the law. It just happened to be that as I'm getting really interested in investigations, there was this like huge change in the law that there was I'll try not to bore you here, but there was the addition of the definition of harassment and violence in the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Okay. And it required employers to do investigations when there's allegations made of workplace harassment, workplace sexual harassment, workplace violence. And so all of a sudden, investigations blew up because now it was a requirement for employers to do these investigations. And so I'd already had an interest. I'd already started doing investigations, and it was just, if you already, if the law changes and you already have a foot in the door with respect to a certain area of law, you just kind of, you kind of run with it, and it goes crazy. And it did. My career just kind of took off from there, and it was really awesome. Yeah. It was great to kind of have that new pathway into something that I really enjoyed. And I think it's something that I'm good at. And I was able to discover it and really thought, it was a good fit for me.
That's so niche and so cool. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just personal preference, did you like working as more of a, before the investigation role, as more of a labor lawyer with unions or employment lawyer? What pros and cons, I
At the
guess?
Bay Street firm, I did both.
Okay.
I would say probably primarily more labor.
Okay.
And then I went to the boutique employment law firm that did the investigations as well, and dropped the labor because there's too many conflicts if
Okay.
you do investigations and do labor, and I won't bore you with it, but there's just
Okay.
too many conflicts. You kind of have to elect to either do labor law or do investigations, and we
Okay.
elected to do investigations, and that was that.
Okay. Okay. So you don't miss labor law then?
I don't. Not at all. It's interesting too, and there's a lot more litigation and a lot more like access to advocacy in labor law than it is in employment law, in my experience. But nothing beats doing investigations, so I would drop
Yeah.
labor law to do that any day of the week.
I know, that's really cool that you're in a fact finder role now.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
And so then what prompted you to transition from being a sole practitioner? So you're in the Bay Street firm, and then were you a sole practitioner at one point? Yes?
Yes, I
Yes.
was.
So then what made you, I guess, like kind of jump around from big firm to sole practitioner to starting your own firm?
Yeah, so I've done most of the transitions that someone can do.
Yeah.
I started at the sister firm, stayed there for a couple of years, and then something happened. We don't need to get into the details, but something happened that really went against my moral compass.
Okay.
And I ended up leaving quite abruptly and going to this smaller
Boutique
employment law firm.
Yeah.
And so it just happened to be that, and I was also at the stage in my career where I wanted more advocacy experience and exposure to clients and what have you. And so this move to the boutique firm was a very natural progression, but it happened a lot quicker because of this moral issue.
Okay.
And so while I was there for a couple of years, and then I got seconded to go work with a client. And so I was there with the client for almost a year. So I basically have done the in-house experience too, which was also incredible. And so I'm lucky to have had all these various exposures to figure out where I belong. And so then after I finished the secondment, my employer at the time wanted to make adjustments to my contract that I didn't agree with. And we couldn't work through the differences. And so I had said, it's a good time for me to start my own practice, because I felt like I was ready to do it.
Yeah.
And we couldn't figure out how to deal with our, differences in opinion of the contract.
Okay.
And so I started my own practice. And I don't know how I knew, but my business partner now, Cedric, he worked with me at the Bay Street firm. And then he went to a different boutique employment law firm. And we always just kept in touch, and we were always, he was the person I called when I wanted to bounce something off of someone else, and vice versa. And at some point it was just like, maybe this is a good fit for us.
Yeah.
And being a sole practitioner is a lot of stress and pressure, because you don't have anyone else you can lean on.
Yeah.
And it's also great because you can make all the decisions yourself, and you don't have any you don't have anyone that has a dissenting opinion about what you should do about ABC issues. But so him and I ended up kind of joking around about it. And then at some point it was, are you serious? Are you serious? Yeah, I'm serious. Yeah, I'm serious. And then it was like, boom. And next thing you know, with like a short runway to plan, we were Singh Lamarche. Wow.
And so did you summer with him at the Bay Street firm, or you just met him there?
I did.
So you guys were on the same path. That is so cool.
Yeah. So we were on the same path. So funny enough, and I'm trying to be careful with my words here, but so we summer together. He ends up in litigation. I ended up in employment law, and I left and went to an employment law firm, and he called me at some point and said he was still at the Bay Street firm and said, like, I need to make a change.
Yeah.
And he was thinking about leaving law.
Wow. Okay.
And I'd said, don't leave law, go into employment law.
Mm-hmm.
And so he ended up going into employment law after I had said, like, don't, this is, there's another way here. Don't leave law.
Yeah.
And so he ended up going into employment law after that. That
Wow.
was, I think there was a big conversation for both of us.
Mm-hmm. That's really, really cool how that worked out. And now it's firm forever. Like, you were happy in this role.
Yeah. He's my business partner for life.
Mm-hmm.
He's stuck with me now.
That's really, that's really cool how that all worked out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so my next question is, I'll ask you, what does success look like to you? Because I'd interviewed actually one of the deans at my law school, and she brought up such an excellent point. She said, early in your career, you need to decide or define what success looks like to you. She's like, some people it's going to be the big Bay Street firm. Some people it's going to be sole practitioner. And she said that's like a really good way to drown out the noise. You can hear everyone's input, but then you really need to figure out what it is that you're looking for in your career. So we're kind of doing a new thing where I ask all of my guests what success looks like to them.
Success has changed quite a bit for me, and how I define success has changed drastically for me. The original conversation with my sister before I even thought to go to law school, and how she defined what success would look like after law school is very different. And what's kind of sucked me into going to law school and is different than why I'm still in law and what I'm looking for now in my career. I started off, I didn't really know when I was in law school, like what is exiting law school? What is success?
Yeah.
And, a lot of people were telling me, and in my social circle, there was a lot of this like Bay Street pressure. And I had always had my mindset to like have sing with my sister, who's now not a Singh, but and so I was always like, whatever I do, I want to come back and be with my sister, and we're going to open this practice together and probably fight a lot but yet practice great law together. And so, but I got this pressure to go to Bay Street because it was just kind of like peer pressure of like, this is the thing to do. And if you have the ability to get there,
it's what you should do. Yeah.
It's what you should do.
Yeah, no, it's still the same way.
Yeah, totally. I know. And I don't know if it's right. And yet I did it, and I've built a career from it. Yeah. So I don't know if it's wrong either, but it's
depends on the person. Back then, like, you obviously made this decision because you were capable of it, and you got the position, and I think it shoehorned you into an awesome career. And then some people, they get there and they're like, maybe not. That's fine.
Yeah. And I had people in my year who had summered and said, forget this isn't for me. And people in my articling who said, forget this, like this isn't for me. Wow. And so, so it could land you in the wrong place if you're kind of buy into that. But I bought into it. And once I bought into it, I would like doubled and tripled down on it. I was like, I'm getting this job. If I'm doing this, I'm getting this job. And so that was success then. And then success was making a change for my clients. Once I started getting access at the boutique law firm, like success was, my clients lean on me and I'm the authority. Yeah. And that was like, and like winning cases or settling cases and watching the result and watching the impact. And that was huge. It was huge for my confidence. It was huge in terms of what I felt success was. And then, at some point success feels like it's making money. And sometimes success feels like you're building a name. Like the fact that my law firm has a presence in the legal community is a really big deal to me. I'll tell you a little tidbit. I have a cousin who I'm very close with, and he was he was with his friend in BC, and his friend found out that his mom had been terminated abruptly.
Okay.
And was quite shaken by what had happened. And my cousin says, this is the area of law that my cousin does. And he's like, yeah, I've got this friend in Toronto, and I'm going to give him a call and see what he thinks. And that he calls that friend, and that friend says, I've got an employment lawyer that I'm going to send you to. Her name's Hena Singh.
Amazing.
And he's sitting with my cousin in BC.
That's amazing.
And my cousin said he was like his proudest moment. And quite frankly, it was one of my proudest moments of my career.
Yeah.
To have this, two people
across
in
the
a
country.
conversation across the country,
yeah,
saying you should talk to this girl.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them being my cousin, which love him, but he's not referring him to me for any other reason than like that's all I know.
Yeah.
But this other lawyer saying that was a big moment in my career. And that in that moment, that's how I define success. Like success was having the name that someone in a really rough spot, someone says, trust this girl.
That's really, really cool. What a compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now success is fighting through barriers and norms to create like work-life balance for myself, and not feeling trapped in being what a traditional successful lawyer is, which is working ridiculous hours and being so focused on money that you miss your kids' birthday parties.
Yeah.
And I went down that path. Thankfully not when I had my daughter. She set me straight. But before that, I was missing big things, and I was missing big events and things that were meaningful to me because law was taking over and the hours and the work was taking over. And so success now means that balance of like being there for your clients and being responsive and being present and being available and being the authority, but also being a mom, being a friend, being a daughter, being a sister, being a whatever, and having integrity in those relationships because you found that balance.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing to me right now.
What a nice place to be in, though. That is awesome.
Yeah.
And would you ever
great.
transition to family law with your sister, or is that a hard no?
Hard no. It's a hard no. Our personalities are such that I would have thought we would have ended up in opposite places. Like I thought she would end up in some sort of like corporate or employment law job, and I would end up in family law because our personalities are such that we should have been in opposite roles. But her and I will never have a firm together, and we're probably better off for it.
That's probably, don't mix work with family. It's just never a good idea. And
totally.
Do you find that you use your psych degree like at all in your practice?
I don't think that there's a day that goes by that I don't.
Okay. Wow.
A lot of being a lawyer, and I think that this is like really sound advice for people going into law from law school is
good. This is my next question. So.
Oh, great. A lot of being a lawyer, especially when you're like client facing, is listening and being attentive and acknowledging what someone's going through. And the number of times that I've said, like, hung up a phone going, I'm not your therapist. And then I'm like, well, I kind of am.
Yeah.
Because I'm the person, I'm not, sorry, and I shouldn't say that, but I'm front facing on probably one of the hardest times of your career,
100%.
career or life.
Yeah.
I'm facing people in times where usually not in times of joy. And so they're coming to me because they're stuck or they need my advice. And sometimes they also need an ear and a shoulder.
Yeah. And,
it's interesting because there's been times when I've had clients and I want to give them like a taxi meter, and so that they can watch how much money they're spending as they're like venting to me or kind of whatever. And at some point I realized no one's complaining about their bills. Like that whatever we're doing is working, right?
Yeah.
It's not, this isn't, I don't, what I see as value is sitting down and giving legal advice and being like pop, 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 and like go.
Yeah.
But the reality is that legal advice is a very, very small part of client management.
Okay.
And so I use my psych and I'm also an investigator. So I'm using my psych degree 100% of the time when my psych degrees, I should say 100% of the time when I'm doing investigations as well. But yeah, it's ever present in my practice.
Yeah, I imagine, especially like in employment law, again, like you're dealing with people at a very emotional time, family law as well. Most of the situations are emotional. So psych would be extremely relevant in those cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And understanding personalities and differences and seeing different angles. And yeah, it's a very useful tool for me.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any other advice for incoming little law students or just graduating law students?
Any other advice? I would say keep your mind open.
Okay.
Your career can take many twists and turns, and keep your mind open. Get if you're not sure about what you want to do, or even if you are sure about what you want to do, keep your mind open in terms of figuring out figuring out a career path. Yeah. Don't ever close your mind off from opportunities to learn more about what different career paths or that you can take. And try different things. If something's not working, don't feel stuck in where you are. Like move on. If you're feeling unhappy or stuck or depressed, which is what ends up happening to an enormous number of lawyers, is find another way. Like I basically covered off most facets of legal professions, having been big firm, small firm, in-house, and then sole practitioner, and then having my own firm. And
I don't think there's anything else.
I don't know if there is. And so, yeah, the way I was able to do that was to remain open-minded and to be able to leap when it wasn't right anymore. Mm-hmm. And instead of staying and feeling stuck, I'm not trying to tell people to like bail on your jobs at the first time it becomes uncomfortable. But at some point, if you're sitting at your desk, head in hand going, what am I doing here? I'm miserable. Mm-hmm. It might be time to think about a different move. And also to make sure that you constantly ask yourself, what is success in this moment? Mm-hmm. Because the number of times I have heard the money's not worth it, and yet people sit and stay and don't make the change or don't readjust the pressures they put on themselves to accommodate for their own changes and needs. That's taking care of yourself and like checking in with yourself throughout your career is what I think is the most important piece of advice. Always take a moment to reflect on what you need. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's awesome advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was fun.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Hena. This was really great to meet you and talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
And that concludes today's episode. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and be sure to tune in next week for Law School Life and Beyond's next episode of the Leadership Series.